The Black Death. The bubonic plague is the most devastating pandemic in human history, and if you were alive in 14th century Europe, you'd have a 1 in 2 chance of being among the 200 million it killed. Imagine it's 1348, and a merchant ship docks in a Sicilian port. The sailors stumble off with strange black spots covering their skin, and within days the entire port town is infected. An infected flea from a rat would bite you while you slept on your straw mattress, and within a week you'd be writhing in agony as your lymph nodes swelled to the size of apples, turning black and oozing pus. The plague moved so fast that entire villages were wiped out in days. Bodies piled in the streets because there weren't enough living people to bury the dead. Families would go to sleep together and wake up to find half their children cold and stiff. Without antibiotics, over 60% of those infected died within days of showing symptoms. The Black Death killed so many people that it changed the course of human history, ending feudalism and reshaping the entire social structure of Europe. COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is a virus that doesn't just attack your lungs, it turns your entire body into a battlefield where your own immune system might be what kills you. It's late 2019, and you've just returned from a crowded market in Wuhan. Within days, you're gasping for air, your oxygen levels plummeting as the virus systematically destroys the tiny air sacs in your lungs. What starts as a dry cough rapidly escalates into full respiratory failure as your lungs fill with fluid and inflammatory cells. The virus hijacks your cells, forcing them to produce millions of copies that burst out and infect neighboring cells in a relentless cascade. Then, in severe cases, your immune system launches a cytokine storm, flooding your lungs with so much inflammation that the tissue scars and hardens. You're placed on a ventilator, but even that might not save you as blood clots form throughout your body, blocking oxygen from reaching your organs. Since 2019, COVID-19 has killed over 7 million people worldwide. Hospitals became war zones with patients dying alone, isolated from their families. Morgues overflowed, and in some cities, refrigerated trucks lined the streets to store bodies. Mass graves were dug in places like New York as the virus spread so fast that funeral homes couldn't keep up with the death toll. Plague of Justinian. The Plague of Justinian was the first recorded outbreak of bubonic plague, and it hit the Byzantine Empire like a nightmare from the depths of hell. Imagine living in Constantinople in 541 AD. You wake up one morning with a slight fever, nothing alarming. By that afternoon, massive buboes have erupted in your groin and armpits, swelling so large you can't move without screaming. By the next morning, you're delirious with fever as the bacteria floods your bloodstream. At its peak, this plague killed 5,000 people per day in Constantinople alone. The bodies stacked so high in the streets that the emperor ordered towers to be filled with corpses, and when those filled up, they simply threw bodies into the sea. The stench of rotting flesh hung over the city like a fog. This bacterial infection killed up to 40% of Constantinople's population and approximately 25 million people across the Mediterranean. Even Emperor Justinian himself caught it, though unlike most, he survived. The 1918 Spanish flu. The Spanish flu was different, and that's what made it absolutely terrifying. Between 1918 and 1920, an outbreak of influenza infected over 1/3 of the world's population and killed 50 million people. But here's the twist that sent doctors into a panic. It wasn't killing the usual victims. Imagine you're a healthy 25-year-old soldier, strong and fit. You wake up one morning feeling fine, by lunch you have a slight cough, and by dinner you're drowning in your own blood as your lungs fill with fluid. The virus triggered something called a cytokine storm, where your immune system goes into overdrive and literally attacks your own lungs. Your body's defense becomes the weapon that kills you. Young, healthy adults were dying within hours while the elderly and children survived. In some military camps, perfectly healthy soldiers would report for morning roll call and be dead by nightfall. The mortality rate hit 20% in some areas, and it burned through the global population so fast that 25 million people died in just the first 25 weeks. Bodies were stacked in warehouses because morgues couldn't handle the volume. The Antonine Plague. The Antonine Plague was likely smallpox, and if you were a Roman citizen in 165 AD, you'd witness something that looked like the end of civilization. Roman soldiers returning from Mesopotamia brought back more than stories of conquest. They brought a disease that would kill 5 million people over 15 years. You'd start with a fever and body aches, nothing unusual. Then, within days, your entire body would erupt in pustules, oozing sores that covered every inch of your skin, even inside your mouth and throat. The pustules would merge together, your skin essentially rotting while you were still alive. Imagine being unable to lie down without excruciating pain because every surface of your body is covered in open, infected sores. At its peak, 2,000 Romans died every day. The streets of Rome ran with blood and pus. Even the co-emperor Lucius Verus died from it, and Marcus Aurelius himself likely fell victim to it as well. The Roman army was decimated, losing so many soldiers that they could no longer defend the empire's borders effectively. Third cholera pandemic. Cholera is the disease that can kill you in hours, and the third cholera pandemic was the deadliest of them all, claiming over 1 million lives. Imagine you're in London in 1854. You drink a glass of water from the public pump on Broad Street. Within hours, you're experiencing violent diarrhea so severe that you're losing liters of fluid. Your skin turns blue-gray from dehydration, your eyes sink into your skull, and your hands and feet turn black as your blood thickens. The bacteria releases a toxin in your intestines that causes your body to expel water so fast that drinking more won't save you. You physically cannot absorb fluids faster than you're losing them. Victims would lose so much fluid that their skin would shrivel like dried fruit. Their voices would become whispers, and they'd die within 24 hours of the first symptom. In 1854 alone, 23,000 people died in Great Britain. Bodies were so dehydrated they barely looked human anymore. This pandemic taught us that clean water is the difference between civilization and catastrophe. The 1968 Hong Kong flu. The Hong Kong flu pandemic killed over 1 million people worldwide, and what made it terrifying was its speed. On July 13, 1968, the first case appeared in Hong Kong. Just 17 days later, it had spread to Singapore and Vietnam. Within 3 months, it had circled the globe, hitting the Philippines, India, Australia, Europe, and the United States. Imagine how it felt watching news reports as the virus hopped from continent to continent faster than anyone could respond. In Hong Kong alone, 500,000 people died, approximately 15% of the entire population. You'd go to work healthy, sit next to a cowering colleague, and by the next week you'd be in bed with a fever that felt like your brain was boiling. The H3N2 strain attacked respiratory systems with brutal efficiency. While its mortality rate was lower than other pandemics at 0.5%, the sheer number of infected meant hospitals were overwhelmed, bodies piled up, and society teetered on the edge of collapse for months. Asian flu. The Asian flu emerged from Guizhou, China in 1956, and over 2 years it methodically worked its way across the planet, killing 2 million people. The H2N2 virus was a genetic mutation that human immune systems had never encountered. If you caught it, your body had no template for fighting it. You'd spike a sudden fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Your muscles would ache so badly you couldn't lift your arms, and then the respiratory symptoms would hit. Your lungs would fill with fluid as the virus replicated in your respiratory tissue. Doctors watched helplessly as patients literally drowned in their own lung fluid. In the United States alone, 69,800 people died. Hospitals ran out of beds, morgues ran out of space. What made this particularly cruel was watching children and the elderly die first, their weaker immune systems unable to mount any defense. The virus moved from Singapore to Hong Kong to the United States in a matter of weeks, leaving a trail of death that reshaped how we think about global disease surveillance. The sixth cholera pandemic. The sixth cholera pandemic originated in India, where it killed over 800,000 people before spreading its tentacles across the Middle East, North Africa, Eastern Europe, and Russia. By this point, humanity had learned from past cholera outbreaks, but that knowledge couldn't stop the horror of watching it unfold. You'd drink contaminated water, and within 6 hours, the violent purging would begin. Cholera doesn't just cause diarrhea, it causes rice water stools, where you're expelling clear fluid mixed with intestinal lining. Victims would lose up to a liter of fluid per hour. Your blood would become so thick from dehydration that it couldn't flow properly. Your muscles would cramp so violently that bones could break. Your pulse would become thread-like, then disappear entirely as your heart struggled to pump sludge through your veins. When it reached America in 1910 to 1911, health authorities quickly isolated cases and only 11 people died. But in India and other affected regions, entire neighborhoods would be wiped out in days. Bodies shriveled and blue piled in mass graves. The Russian flu. The Russian flu was the first pandemic of the modern bacteriology era, and it taught humanity that even with all our new scientific knowledge, we were still vulnerable. First detected in May 1889 in 3 distant locations simultaneously, Bukhara, Athabasca, and Greenland, this was likely an H3N8 influenza strain. If you lived in a rapidly growing urban center, you were in the perfect breeding ground for disaster. The flu spread through cramped tenement buildings, factories, and public transportation at lightning speed. You'd board a train car feeling fine and exit it with a fever that would keep you bedridden for weeks. The virus killed over 1 million people globally. What terrified people was how the disease seemed to appear everywhere at once, as if the world had suddenly become too connected for its own good. The rapid population growth of the 19th century became a weapon the virus used against us. Cities became death traps, and people realized that the Industrial Revolution had created the perfect conditions for pandemics to spread faster than ever before in human history. Smallpox killed more people in the 20th century alone than both world wars combined, an estimated 300 to 500 million victims. The variola major strain didn't discriminate, and if you contracted it, you faced a brutal 30% chance of death. You'd start with what felt like the worst flu imaginable, your back seized with pain so intense you couldn't stand upright. Then your tongue would swell, covered in sores that made every swallow feel like razor blades. But the real horror began when the rash appeared. Within 24 hours, thousands of raised bumps would cover your body from head to toe. Your face, arms, legs, even the palms of your hands and bottoms of your feet. These weren't just spots, they were deep pustules filled with thick, opaque fluid that would scab over and leave permanent pockmarks. In the worst cases, the hemorrhagic variant would cause you to bleed internally, your skin turning purple-black as blood pooled beneath the surface before you bled out from every opening in your body. Those who survived were often left blind, sterile, or so badly scarred they were unrecognizable. When Europeans brought smallpox to the Americas, it annihilated up to 90% of indigenous populations who had never encountered the virus before. HIV/AIDS pandemic. HIV is a virus that doesn't just kill you, it turns your own immune system into a ghost town before other infections finish you off. It's 1985, and you've noticed some strange purple spots on your skin. Within months, you're wasting away, your body unable to fight off the simplest infections. A common cold becomes pneumonia. A minor cut becomes a life-threatening infection. Your immune system's T cells, the soldiers that protect your body, are being hijacked by the virus and turned into factories that produce more HIV. The virus essentially hollows out your immune system cell by cell until your body has zero defenses left. Then, opportunistic infections that a healthy person would never notice begin to feast on your defenseless body. Since 1981, HIV/AIDS has killed over 35 million people worldwide. In sub-Saharan Africa during the worst years, entire villages lost their working-age populations. Children became orphans en masse. In some countries, 1 in 5 adults carried the virus, walking time bombs, watching their bodies slowly betray them.